So becoming a developer can be extremely lucrative profession. Not only lead to financial freedom, but also one of those rare professions that can give you the freedom to work from pretty much anywhere that you want, and for whoever you want as well. And that's partly the reason why so many people are making the switch over to software development in the first place. But the biggest challenge tends to be landing that first job, and learning to code is kind of only part of that puzzle. And if you're not learning the right things or presenting yourself in the right way, it can be a real struggle to land that first job. Today, however, to hopefully help you out a little bit, I have the author of Breaking the Code and the CEO of a bootcamp out in the US called CoderFoundry, Bobby Davis. Hi, Bobby. How are you?
Hey, doing great. How are you doing?
Yeah, too bad, thank you, Bobby. Not too bad. Thanks for coming on and spending some time. So, sure. I guess firstly, tell me a little bit about your background and I guess what ultimately led you to start CoderFoundry.
Yeah, so at my heart, I'm a developer, write a lot of code. I've run a couple of companies, consulting company and CoderFoundry. And when I was running my consulting company back in 2013, I noticed a trend coming out of college that people weren't being taught how to code coming out of college. They had the algorithmic skills and all these other things, but like, can you build a website today was like, I've kind of put one together. Not really. And so like me and a lot of other industries across the US in 2013, a lot of boot camps were created. We were right on the forefront of doing that because we realized that university education was lacking in the hard coding skills. So we wanted to teach people how to code. And since I couldn't find them, I decided to start building them. And that's where the name CoderFoundry came from. Like, in other words, like we'll make a foundry where we can create developers to enter into the job market with hard coding skills. From that, it's like when we backed up, we were like, okay, what does a developer need to know? And a lot of people think the skills are down here. We believe they're kind of up here at the top level of the market to realistically give you a chance. And so our curriculum's built from what is necessary, not what's necessarily easiest to teach. And that's kind of the genesis of the book. Is like, what are the 5 steps you need to do to get a job, whether you go to CoderFoundry or go to college or whatever. So the book that I wrote helps people get jobs, and it's been sold all across the U.S. And you read it, so now it's in England too. So like that's great. So
Yeah, I did. I say read it. I listened to it. I'm not great with reading, but I enjoyed it. I think I said to you, I was getting myself psyched up to learn to be a developer about 3 or 4 times during it. But one of my favorite lines I think from the book was like that the American dream still exists, but it's written in code. Like I think it's great. And I know it was a couple of years ago that you wrote it. Looks like you kind of released it mid-pandemic. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, just like everyone else, a lot of people looked at pandemic in 2020 as like the end of the world. And I was trying to convince people, like, even when these are downtimes, coding is the absolute economic mobilizer. It crosses all types of people, places, jobs. Where does every company is a software company? And so that means every company is pretty much hiring developers. And so how do you get into that economic mobilizer? How can you get that extra higher salary than a traditional job? And that's what coding offers. And that's why I wrote the book, why we started CoderFoundry, is to help people transition from one career, maybe a career they don't like, into a rewarding career that pays way above average, especially in the US.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we found that as well. Like, we founded the company back in 2020, literally mid-pandemic. And whilst some companies started to slow down, there were others that were having enormous kind of booms, like online education. The one company we did some work with, which was like a virtual car showroom, like all sorts of stuff. So like you said, it just kind of pivots in terms of industry, but the need for coders hasn't gone and isn't going anywhere.
Nowhere, no time soon. So
sure.
Even the current scare now is like, is AI going to take my job? Is they're seeing layoffs here and a lot of the big tech companies across the world? Is that going to happen? And I think it's projected in the U.S. that it'll be the highest employment job that you can find over the next 10 years. And so in the U.S. they're saying that it'll be 300 to 400,000 brand new jobs in the U.S. over the next 10 years, which puts it right up there with the medical profession, and coding's right there at it. And so like, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. The question is, how do you get a job? How do I actually break in? What do I need to do?
For sure. And you talk about those 5 steps in your book to get that first tech job. And I think the majority of people listening will either have chosen or learnt their tech stack and potentially done their boot camp or sort of education already. But for the benefit of anyone that hasn't, we'll run through the first 2 points. So the first one, you obviously talk about learning the right stack. And this one's interesting for me because we do a lot of recruitment in the .NET space. And you're one of the only boot camps really that I see like that is teaching .NET. Like so many of them are JavaScript. Obviously, a few years ago they were all Ruby on Rails. Like what made you choose .NET? And are you kind of still like 3 years later after doing that book, are you still hand on heart think .NET is the best stack to be learning?
Yeah, still that way. So like here's a couple of reasons that we saw. I also have a YouTube channel, and you check us out, CoderFoundry. You can look us up on YouTube. And we had a lot of people coming in and telling us, I can't find a job. I can't do this job. And I was like, well, what did you learn? And they said, well, I'm learning 8 things. I'm like, well, why are you learning 8 things? Like, let's focus on one. So I think the mistake everyone makes, unless they have someone to tell them what to do, is what should I learn? And they learn a stack, but they don't really pick a job. And so if you pick a job first, that's going to limit the amount of things you need to learn. And that's why we see some of the bad advice is, well, just learn Python. Python's used for everything. Well, no, it's primarily used for data science. It's not used for building websites. And so then they go in the website market and they're like, yeah, we don't use Python. And so what you want to do is pick your job first. If you have no idea what job to pick website development. That's where all the money's at. And you can say that if you recruited for any job, most of them are website development jobs, and the stacks vary in there. But today, as we're speaking, .NET's one of those. There's obviously React and Angular and all the JavaScript flavors, and that's kind of where most of the market lives. And so we picked, and still do, .NET because it's backed by Microsoft. Most of the large enterprises are using .NET in one of the other flavors. That could be MVC, that could be Web API. It could be a mixture of React plus Web API. But C# is that core language that runs on the back end that everyone uses to build enterprise-grade websites. And that's the type of customer we want our CoderFoundry grads to go to. And while it's not as popular sometimes in tech Twitter says everything's written in JavaScript when it's not. I look at what is the bank down your street using? What is the large airline using? What is, the big companies, the big logistics company, what are they using to build their stuff? And typically somewhere along the way, that is .NET. And so it gets you into these larger companies, which means more money, better benefits, better opportunities. And because Microsoft does a good job of pushing this out worldwide, it gives you opportunities no matter where you're at. So, but what I will say in the book is, if you don't want to use .NET for whatever reason, pick a stack that is prominent in web development. Right now, there's 3 of those, really: React, Angular, and then .NET would be one of those. You could pick Java too. Java's another, with Spring Boot, something like that. But pick something that's building websites, not something that someone said, oh, that language is nice, or I like how that language is used. Well, how is the industry using that stack? And if that's data science, then you've got to go after data science and not web development.
Yeah, for sure. So if someone's just finished a boot camp and it wasn't in .NET, they don't need to go and do another one straight away.
No, they don't need to come to CoderFoundry straight away. But we'll talk about the other thing. The second thing is choosing your boot camp or choosing your school. And I think that the big thing that people don't understand is, what am I going to get after my education? So they go to college because I want a college degree, which is great. But a college degree doesn't necessarily get you a job. You have to have something to show. So if you go to a boot camp and you don't have anything to show, then you need to start building a portfolio with the stack that you were taught. So if you went to a React boot camp or something like that, you need to build projects inside with that stack, and then take those projects and interview for a React job. One of the things that people trying to break into this job is they're trying to show skills that they have and try to apply for a job that those skills don't align. And it's very difficult to hire a junior and like, well, we do .NET here and you wrote in Angular, so we're just going to find a .NET person or vice versa. So you have to align the stack with the projects and then go shop companies that use that stack, and you have a much better chance to get into it. In the book, we go through the types of projects you should build, but in general, you should have a project that solves a business problem, which means that something that the person can recognize when they look at it. What I do see a lot of bootcamp grads is their biggest project is something like a Pokédex. It's like, that's just not going to move the needle in an interview. We recommend building a bug tracker where when the person sees the project, they go, oh, I know what that does. We have one of those here. How did you handle this? And then that leads into a discussion about your code. And that's when you win interviews, is when you start talking about things that you have built with the hiring manager, and you can win that way.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, the other one that I like, obviously your step 3 is building that portfolio. Mm-hmm. The other one that I really liked was the idea of the blog. So like you said, solution to like a real world problem, but it also gives you the ability to show your kind of coding journey and the way that you communicate and all of that as well. So I think that's a great idea. You see people's kind of documenting their journey on LinkedIn, and it's obviously really useful, but to kind of like maybe even get those posts and put them within a blog that you've made yourself, I think is a great idea.
Yeah, so we had a student interviewing for a job or a .NET role, and they found that student through his blog.
Really?
And then the hiring manager and the tech lead were sitting in the interview, true story, and they were saying, see, Chris, he writes about code. Why don't we write about code? Why does our company not have a blog or write about blog? And so that brought him credibility to the interview, even though he's interviewing for a junior role right off the bat, because they read about something and then they learned something and then they hired that person. And I think that's what a blog can do for you. And now you really have no excuse with ChatGPT. You can get an outline for a blog in minutes and kind of make sure that it's correct. As we know, that AI sometimes lies. And make sure it's correct, and you have no excuse now to push your blog or your content out so people can read it.
Sure. And then like you were saying about that bug tracker, my favorite other story was you saying that you got a call after someone had interviewed, basically asking if they could implement that bug tracker at their company because it was that good. I enjoyed that.
So the student called me and they said, I didn't know how to answer this. They asked me, could they use it there? And I'm like, well, yeah, go out there, tell them, you hired me, you can use it. Like that's what you do. And they ended up using the bug tracker there for their issue tracking system, which is kind of cool.
Love that. And then kind of the final point you made on those was like, obviously you want them to be functional, but like also make them look pretty as well. Like actually spend the time to make them look good. For, I guess, people just like that look and feel of something that is appealing on the eye, right?
Yeah. So sometimes we'll talk to computer science grads. They'll come into our program, and then we'll push them on the UI aspects of it. And they're like, well, I'm just a back-end coder. I don't care how it looks. And I keep telling them, like, if you went to a car lot and you're buying a brand new car, and it was all scuffed up and had no paint on it, there's no matter what they told you about the engine or the interiors or whatever it is, it just looks broken. And so unless it doesn't, it has to be looking good on the outside in order for someone to realize that the code is great on the back end. And I always say, if it looks janky, they assume that the back end is janky too. So, but if it looks great, you remove that benefit, you get the benefit of the doubt. And like, okay, let's look further. Let's look into this now because you've put it together. And I think every website that you build, every project you should build, should have a minimum professionalism that you put onto it for the front end so that people can use it. We also pay attention to the details like demo login. So like if you have a bug tracker, you can like go to that bug tracker and then immediately the user with one button can just demo the product instead of having to register, and like they're never going to do that. But if you can give them a quick demo and then it looks like $1 million, you're more than likely to get an interview request, which is all we're trying to do, is use these projects to get interview requests, talk about your code, and then get a job.
Yeah, for sure. And I think particularly when it's your portfolio, like, and you've got the time to spend on it, like why would you not make it look as good as you possibly can, right? I think it's different if you've got a company asking you to complete like a take-home assignment or something like that. Sometimes they want the functionality over over how it looks and all that kind of stuff if it's a limited time. But I think if it's your own portfolio and something like you said that you're putting out there as like this is me and this is what I can do, like why would you not make it look as good as possible?
Exactly. And one of the things that we do, even with take-home tests, I'm glad you mentioned that. Like I had a guy to have a take-home test, and he came back to us, and they had to make a restaurant site. And so the restaurant was just like, build a restaurant site, and we want you to create this order page. And so what we wanted them to show them was like, hey man, let's go get a template, put a template on the front end of this so that it looks like a real website instead of just a CRUD page where it's like create this order and things like that. And so while the company asked for just the CRUD page of this, when you present it with a slick UI using something like Bootstrap or Tailwind or whatever you want to use, or put a template on it by a template, it just raises the bar as you as a candidate right off the bat. And usually it doesn't take that much time to do it once you know how to utilize, implement a template. And they're like, wow, okay, that's cool. All I wanted was the CRUD page, so like, but it gives them that leg up in the interview process. So I think even in the take homes, make it look good. Now, don't spend all your time trying to make it look good. You got to solve the problem that they're sending you. But like, if you've got a few more minutes, slap a template on it, one that you've used a lot, and just go to market with that when you turn it back in.
Yeah, I tend to find like the more junior the position that people are interviewing for, the more they want people to demonstrate that they can go above and beyond. Yeah. Particularly with the take-home test, like you said, if people do the bare minimum, sometimes they're like, am I like? They could have done anything. They could have spent like another, like you said, like small things that they could have done more of. Whereas obviously it needs to do what it's been asked to do, like, and it needs to be functional. But like people spending an extra couple of hours or sometimes people will have said to me, oh, I'm kind of ready to turn this in like today. And I'll be like, take the weekend. Like if you're not proud of it yet, like this is how you're going to get your foot in the door with this company, is you showing that you will take more time on it because you're more junior, and that really does I guess give them that foot in the door, right?
Yeah, the other thing that we have to fight against, especially juniors, is they'll go out on tech Twitter, and there's a lot of movement with seniors. They're saying, I'm not doing a take-home test, I'm not spending 5 days of my week to do it. And then a junior will take on that same attitude. And I have to tell them, like, you don't have 20 years experience. You can't afford to do that. And so, and they also think, well, I don't want to do free work for the company. Like, why would I do all this free work for a company? I heard a student tell me this, for a job I'm not going to get. I'm like, well, don't assume you're not going to get it. And B, the work is for you. This is for you to get a real life challenge and challenge yourself to make it. And then if it looks great, put it on your portfolio at the end of the day. There's no one saying that you can't use it elsewhere. So if you made a restaurant site or some kind of recipe site for which is two common coding challenges we're seeing right now from companies, put it on your portfolio and show it to the next person that has it. But spend the time, because you're investing in you and not necessarily in the company. You're investing in you, and you won't win it otherwise. So put the most amount of effort, especially trying to get that first job, as you can. And don't listen to people with 20 years experience who have options. They're going to get like 10 offers. They don't have to do all of these jumping through hoops, but in your first couple of years, you might have to, and that's okay. You'll get paid more than you were, doing DoorDash or delivering pizza or something like that. So like now we're building a career, and you always invest in you when you write code. Yeah,
for sure. And I think, like you said, I've seen people be able to give projects that they've done and be like, oh, I've actually just done a similar one for this other organization. Right. Like, would you mind taking a look at that first? And they're like, yeah, brilliant. You don't need to do this one. So if you do it right once, like you might be able to send that to other companies. So, and like you said, the more senior you get, the less that is necessary. And I have clients that I'm constantly battling to take tech tests and like leak codes and things like that out of their interview process, because some of them will give the same things to every level. And like you said, there's a certain level of seniority where like experience speaks for itself. But at the junior level, like without having that experience, like this is pretty much all they've got to go on as to whether like you're going to be able to code essentially and follow instructions and all those extra things that people are getting from the tech assessment as a whole. So in step 4, you basically say talk about the code. And like obviously you talk about hacking the interview process and all of that, which I actually really liked the idea of, and I hadn't heard of people doing it in that way before, which I think is great. So do you want to tell me a little bit about how you teach people to hack the interview process?
This is, if anyone's listening to this is our absolute secret sauce inside of CoderFoundry that I tell everyone to do, and people still don't to this day not listen. But this comes back to my ability to sell people on things. And so I looked at like, why do people buy and why do they do it? And so if you come to an interview process, you need to consider this. I'm selling me into the company, so they're going to buy me as a candidate. How do I get them to do that? Where the other good salesperson always has a demo deck, or they have proof of work or something like that, where they're saying, can you do this for me? And you say, yes. In fact, here's what we did, A, B, and C. We want to do the same thing during the interview process. When we get a question, a technical question, it needs to come with two answers. One is the academic answer. So if they ask you, hey, what is an integer or something like that? Or have you ever used a string? And what is a string? And you can say, well, a string is an array of characters. And that's a great answer. But what if you say the key words to remember this is for example? What if you say it's a string and an array of characters, for example? I had to, and then you talk about where you've used that before in a project. And you can go down the list of the top 30 interview questions in your stack. So we train students at CoderFoundry. Here are the top 30 questions we've seen over the last 12 months. And here's the academic answer, and here's where we use those in the projects that you built them in. This is how you answer it. You go academic first, and then you go to concrete example right after that, show them the code, and then you ask them, hey, do you let me show you that? I've got it right here on my laptop. Let me demo where I used interfaces, or let me demo where I used a service. And as soon as you demo your code and you start talking about your code, you can take the interview questions, which are the top 30 questions they have, and suddenly you've redirected the interview towards a code base that you've written, and now you've turned it from a closed book test to an open book test, and you've taken control of the interview because you're going to dictate what the questions are based on what they're looking at on the screen. And it works, I would say, a good 80 to 90% of the time when you can redirect the interview to your code base. And you should know your code base at that point, which means they're not going to ask you anything that you don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's how you take control of it, and you dictate what they'll ask you.
And there's just so many advantages of that. Like, one, you probably put yourself at ease because you're literally just talking through your code.
Right.
Like, two, like it's going to show your communication skills, and
right.
Three, you're showing them your code.
Yeah.
And why would you not do that? Like you said, most people would just be like, phew, like I've got the question right. Like, let's wait for the next question. Whereas,
right, just stand there like this. Next,
just crack your laptop open and kind of show them and talk them through it, which is probably what they might do in like a further round or something like that if you're successful. Like, why not bring that forwards and kind of show them? I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, imagine this, Chris. Imagine that you're stressing over what they're going to ask you, and then you just say, hey, let's look at my code, and you have the code base on a screen. You're viewing it together. On Zoom, it's super easy to do now.
Yeah.
And now you're looking at the code. They're asking, hey, what's that line do? And you're looking right at it. So you don't have to memorize anything. You just have it completely open book, and you can just walk them through. The second thing you can do is only show the pages you want them to view anyway. So you don't have to memorize every single nook and cranny of your website. You're just taking to the pages you know really well, and that way you can even limit further the questions they're going to ask you. And then once they see this person wrote a project, the person knows how the project works, they know it at a deep level, they're going to hire you. You've talked to people before, even at seniors, where you can't tell if they're working day to day or you like carrying the coffee cup around. Like, what do you do every day? Like, do you code? And when you ask them questions about details, they sometimes get really fuzzy on that, and you realize, oh, maybe they're not coding every day. It's only they're going to lots of meetings, they participate, but maybe they're not a full-blown developer anymore. And that's the number one thing that when I interview developers is, can you tell me specifically how this page works? And that clues me in if they're working on that project day to day, or if they're, like I said, just carrying the coffee cup around, they're on the team, happy to be there.
Yeah, for sure. And then you got step 5, which obviously I was very happy to hear. Work with a recruiter. And like you said, kind of like in your book, there's a lot of things out there about not working with the recruiters and why they shouldn't. And there are a lot of bad ones out there. But I think, like you said, there's so many benefits to working with a recruiter. What would you say is the main reasons why you encourage your bootcamp graduates to work with one?
Yeah, the thing that I don't understand about the hate on recruiters and is that if you played professional sports like in the NBA here in the US or the NFL, you have to have an agent to get on those NFL teams. Now, some of them work without an agent. They have a hard time breaking in, getting on a team, getting a role. And there's two reasons why you should work with a recruiter. Number one, you may not be able to get to the job because it's not listed, and the company is only working with a recruiter to find the people for those roles. The second thing, and I call that the hidden job market. So if there's 60 jobs out there in your area right now, there's probably 50 more that are working through recruiters. The second thing that happens is the company hires the recruiter and they post an ad. And so the ad comes in, they get 100 requests in from Indeed or their job board or whatever. But you, Chris, you walk in there and you go, I got 5 resumes that I can get you an interview right now. And he's looking at a stack of 100 resumes. Yours goes right to the top. He flips through them. And even though he's paying you a fee, he's just going to go with the known commodity right off it, because it's a whole lot easier than looking through 100 resumes that don't match. And he's got to do 100 screening calls to find the right candidate. You've already done all that work for them. People don't understand like the speed at which recruiters can operate once a job posting goes out. The moment it goes out, the recruiter's already there with 5. You're applying 3 days later on the job posting. You're already in negotiations for salary. Just like they don't even know that it's already been filled and it's only been out for 3 days, because the recruiter sometimes has it before it goes out on Indeed. And so it's the hidden job market. It's that the recruiter's there first. And also the other thing that recruiters do is sometimes they'll just reach out to you and say, hey, what are your skills? What are you doing? And then I'll go out and try to find you a match. Wouldn't you rather have someone out there that's looking for all the opportunities and comes back and tells you what they are, instead of you trying to go through every job board, trying to figure out, hey, is this a good job? Is this a bad company? And then there's employment scans that people run into where recruiters can sift through those things and make sure that it's a legitimate company, it's a legitimate offer, they're going to pay you, they're stable. I've placed 3 people there. It's a great place. And I think all of that together, there's no downside to working with a recruiter. I think where this comes from is that recruiters and the developers sometimes misplace the relationship, where they think that we're best friends, like me and you are best friends, and you're going to call me every day and we're going to go to lunch together. And the only time you call them is when you have a need. And I try to explain to people, like, treat it as a business relationship. You may make best friends with your recruiter. You may go out on a date with them. I don't know. But in general, use it as a business relationship. So when they call you, always take their call, be courteous, be responsive, because when they've got an opportunity, you need to fill it right away. We had a recruiter call a student 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the recruiter called him, and it was at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, and he told him that he was busy right then and there, but he'll call him back tomorrow. Well, guess the recruiter didn't call back the next day, and he called me. He says he was upset. And I'm like, no, you take the call at 10 a.m. when he's talking to you, because he just went down the list to find 20 other dudes, and he got us 5 candidates, and he stuck them in front of them tomorrow. It's very time sensitive, and they will operate with speed and efficiency. And if you're in that game and you're on the top call with them, it's great. The other thing, let me ask you a question about recruiting. How is it if you've placed someone and then you go out and they call you back and they say, hey, I'm looking again, you're more likely to take their call because, hey, I've already made 20% on this guy. Let me go do that again because I feel like he can interview and he can win roles, versus the unknown person. You have no idea if they'll show up to the interview or what they're going to do. But these people that you've worked with in the past, you're more than likely to place them. And that's why I'm saying that you need relationship recruiters that last multiple years over multiple roles, because when you need them, they'll help you, especially if they placed you before, man. You're like easy money at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And you get to that point and you don't even need to look. You don't even need to put yourself open to work. You just call either one or maybe 2 recruiters that you worked with in the past and just say hey, I'm thinking about making a change. What do you have? And right. They'll have a few options within a couple of days and they can just pick and choose. So it is like it just makes sense. And
Right.
I think there are bad recruiters out there, and I think like recruiters aren't technical. So I think one of the biggest things that people get frustrated about is that you might get jobs that are sent to you that are irrelevant or wrong or like things like that. But you'll also get ones that are right. And ultimately, particularly if you're trying to find your first job, like just sift through and like speak to the recruiters that know what they're doing. Because I think like you talked about as well, like if someone's using a recruiter, they're serious about hiring, they want to do it quickly, they're paying that person to do the recruiting for them because they don't have the person internally. And what the recruiter can do for you is actually influence the process as well. So you talked about like putting that stack of 5 people on top of it, but like on top of that, they can also sell you in. So they can talk about the experience that you have that's not on your resume, or like what you're like as a person, or like you might have something in common with the hiring manager who will know very well, and we can say, I think you guys would get on great because of X, Y, and Z. And we can also prep you for what people are looking for in the take-home test, like what the person's going to be like, what time they're going to join the call, like little things about that and about the company that you wouldn't know from just being set up kind of directly. And I think, like you said as well, the majority of jobs that we work on aren't posted. Like we have agreements with our clients that we wouldn't work on the job if they were also looking themselves, because we wouldn't fill it and we ultimately wouldn't make any money. So sometimes it's that we're still working on stuff that's advertised directly, but the majority of the time we're just doing the recruitment for them. And you did compare me to an NFL agent, but you did say in your book that we're more valuable than an NFL agent, which I'm going to take, which is
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like it is crazy that I have juniors tell me I don't like recruiters. I'm like, you've never worked with one, number one. So like, stop it. You're just listening to these other people. And then I think that's the other thing that goes into it is that recruiters aren't technical. And I try to tell them they're not. Just get over it. Tell them what you want. Know what the job you're looking for is and say, hey, I'm looking for this. The other thing is give them something to pitch the client, which you said in a very important point. And I want everyone to understand this. Recruiters sell you into the job. Like they want their candidate to win over the 100 other ones that come in. So they're selling you in there. So if you have a portfolio or you have something and you've pitched it to your recruiter, the recruiter can turn around and pitch that to the company and go, hey, look at this portfolio. How many of your guys have a portfolio like this? Look at what he's done. And so it allows them to engineer an interview for you. We engineer interviews we have internal recruiters here at CoderFoundry, and even if they apply directly, we turn around and call that company and say, hey, Frank just applied for this role. And they're like, what was his name? And you can hear them shuffling through the paper, and they've got them printed out. And they're like, you just saved that HR manager half their day. And they're like, oh, I'm going to forward this to the hiring manager right now. Thanks for calling. And they don't understand, like, recruiters do the follow-up game for you. They can tell you what the salary is, like where you fit in the range, so you don't overprice or underprice yourself in there. There's a lot of benefits to it that can't be understated. If you're not working with a recruiter as a developer, you're doing it wrong.
For sure. And then one of the last points that you kind of say is, and one of your biggest bits of advice is just to take the first job. Like, and I guess that was quite a brutally honest piece of advice that I hadn't heard so many. And like you said, there's a lot of fluffy stuff on LinkedIn and all of that about wait for your dream job. But I think, like you said, like it's very hard to find that first job. So I guess that still stands as much now as ever, right? Like getting your foot in the door is the hardest bit. So
yeah, what I always tell people is it won't be your first job. It's not going to be your last. And it doesn't even have to be your dream job. You can get your dream job as you build a career. And so many people are trying to land the career job first one out, and it's not going to happen. So just take it for the experience more than anything. And so once you have 1 year experience, as you know, then recruiters can place you easier, and your world changes once you get 1 year experience. So even if you have to take a terrible job, at least you're getting paid, you're getting experience. And then that second year, that third year, it makes your life so much easier. And by year 5, you know this, you don't even have to look anymore. You just call the recruiter, call you on the phone. Hey, Chris, what do you got? And he says, matter of fact, I'm looking right now. So what do you think about this role? And you can be placed quickly in almost any market in the US, especially.
Or even start your own company.
You
as
can
said.
start your own company. Yeah. Once you have experience, people will hire you then directly, as a freelancer or as a consultant, which is what I did. I went after the consulting gig, and it's only because I had done a lot of things for a lot of people, and I had a Rolodex where I'd worked, and it was pretty easy.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Bobby. Really appreciate that. And for anyone that hasn't listened to it before, it's called Breaking the Code. It's on Amazon. It's on Audible, which is where I got it.
Yeah.
And I guess any kind of final bits of advice, Bobby, for people kind of currently looking for their first job.
Yeah. Don't give up if you lose the first interview. Take notes from that first interview and write down every question they asked you, and then go back and review those to see how you performed. And then take that and take it into the next interview, and don't give up. Just keep interviewing, getting better and better. No one's keeping track whether you failed 30 interviews or not. Just keep getting better by looking at your questions and try to demo your code. What I always say is, the quicker you demo, the quicker you get hired.
For sure. Well, thanks, Bobby, and thanks everyone for listening. I'll see you guys soon.
Thanks.